What's up, strength coaches? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore. Before we get into this episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you are notified when we release more content. Today on the show, I am joined by Erica Ziel, who is a Pilates instructor. She's actually my Pilates instructor, and she's worked with other athletes, including NFL athletes. We talk about why Pilates is a good addition to your strength training. It does not replace strength training, but it is a fantastic addition, and it has helped me out with my hip health. Find out how it's something that you should be incorporating with your athletes. So first of all, thanks for coming on the show and talking shop with us. My first question for you is, why should athletes do Pilates, and why do most strength coaches think that athletes shouldn't? And let's just clear that air up, because I'm a strength and conditioning coach and I believe that they should, because I feel very good going once a week. So I'm a user, been training with you for quite some time now, for anybody to get some context.
Justin, first off, thanks so much for having me. Yes, I think Pilates is amazing. I think all athletes should be doing Pilates. There's so many massive benefits to Pilates, from really teaching someone's body how to work together really effectively. And I think that's the biggest difference. And someone who started, my background is in exercise science. I was really started off hard in the fitness industry when I started. Fortunately, I discovered Pilates while I was still in college, and it has just been that piece that I'm supposed to be teaching people, and really discovered early on the power that Pilates can teach us how to be stronger within from our deep core. So not just our core. And I'm going to talk a lot, Justin, so pick out of what you want me to go deeper in, because I could talk for hours on the benefits of Pilates. But what Pilates really can teach athletes about their body is how to be stronger within and connecting the entire body together. Because I feel, okay, when I learned about weight training and things like that, a lot of times we tend to piecemeal the movements together. And while there might be benefits to that for some degree, what I really find helps people to become stronger is when they learn how to move effectively with their entire body. If we're doing a leg exercise, what's our core supposed to be doing? What should our mid-back be doing? How should we be breathing? And that's one thing that we really learn, is how to breathe with every single movement, so we're not holding our breath. That holding of our breath can cause a lot of pelvic floor dysfunction and back pain, which I know can sound crazy. Talking with in the athletic world, we can talk deeper about why I think it's so important to understand that. But also in Pilates, the other piece I really like to hit on is the fascial connections through the body. So I really love geeking out about the power of fascia. So research even shows that when we train our fascial system correctly, we can be stronger through our fascial system than we can be with just working our muscular system. And I know that can sound really bizarre and crazy, but when we're working our fascial system, we're also working our muscular system for sure. If we're just focused on our muscles, yes, we're working our fascia to a degree, but we're not necessarily getting into the full entire fascial system of connecting our toe to our opposite pinky, connecting our foot to the top of our head through our core. Does that make sense? That's a lot of stuff I just threw out there.
Get CEUs faster, cheaper, and more convenient than ever before with Strength Coach Network. Hey, it's Justin, here to tell you about how Strength Coach Network can now help you out with our premium membership and CEUs to the NSCA and CSCCa. Upon signing up for our premium membership, you will get 2.0 or 10 CEUs immediately. That is an entire year's worth of CEUs that you are able to access from the convenience of your office. No traveling for conferences, no waiting on flights, no eating out, no expensive hotels. Just the good stuff from great coaches. Now, if you need extra CEUs for past years during the reporting period, we can bundle Fundamentals 1 or 2, which also come with 2.0 or 10 CEUs to your purchase. That way you're able to take care of your CEUs for the best price, most convenient, and learn from some of the best coaches. If you want more help with this, email us at service@strengthcoachnetwork or visit us at strengthcoachnetwork.com, and I would be delighted to help you out. No, you're good. And so that's one of the questions that I had I was just at the NSCA coaches conference, and I talked about this with some coaches. So I was like, all right, if fascia is what wraps the muscle, how are you training your fascia, but also not training your muscles? But I do also believe in the whole notion of the anatomy trains, the different slings and patterns of the body and things that Dan Paff has talked about where, hey, right shoulder could be what's limiting hip flexion. So it's like,
Absolutely.
I personally am trying to understand that more.
Yeah. And fortunately, like for me, I think I got thrown into this at a really early on in my career because I found movement because that was the piece that basically I learned to rehabilitate my own body when I was in my late teens, early 20s. So I was fortunate to be able to go into movement, not just on you learn about periodization and structuring workouts and programming, and that's all great. But then I quickly really discovered that while there's a place for that, what I really love doing and helping people with is helping them get stronger through their entire body. So posture is a big thing in the Pilates world. I think once you weave in the deep core function and fascia, we can take it to an even deeper level and put it into the notion of functional movement, right? Because there's posture. I actually just had this conversation with a client earlier today, was talking about posture. And the goal is not to have perfect posture. The goal is to have functioning posture. So we're out of pain. We're working on whatever sorts of prevention or minimizing potential for injury or helping our body to be stronger and more protected if we are to get an injury or whenever at some point we get an injury, that we can then heal more quickly because our body knows how to work together. And that's a big piece of it. And that whole idea of, and again, I learned this very early on, and I talk about so much of what I do starts at the pelvis with a client. And we can agree or disagree. Is it the foot or the pelvis? Is it the shoulder or the pelvis? But I always find if we can start at the pelvis, what's going on with someone's pelvic movement, then it can help us up the chain and down the chain. And then we can go deeper, obviously. And then there's clients where I'm like, no, we got to work more on what your foot is doing because that's obviously affecting your hip. But if our hips are all over the place, we're not learning how to work that foundation together, then what our feet are doing, what our shoulders are doing, just don't work as cohesively together. And then learning how to really connect, again, talking about fascia, from our feet through to our arms and that full range of motion. But it's not just full range of motion, right? It's learning how to like lengthen and to be connected all at the same time. And that's a really weird and hard concept initially for people to get. Like you have to watch your athletes that are hypermobile, right? We get athletes that are, especially I would say females tend to be more hypermobile than males. Yeah. Not always, but it is really interesting to see that you can have clients, athletes that look very restricted in some ways, but they're hypermobile in other ways. And those restrictions, they are restricted because their body's trying to balance itself out and stay really tight in some areas because of hypermobility in other areas, for example. So something that will drive me nuts is when I hear people talk about, oh, I just got to stretch, right? We just got to stretch that tight area. And I'm like, I don't know if you use bad language on your show or not, but sometimes I'm like, F no, we don't want to be stretching just tight muscles. We have to ask the question of why is that tissue tight in the first place? It's likely tight for a lot of people because it's overcompensating because another area isn't strong enough or there's overcompensation. So I actually find a lot of times we have to work to strengthen in a lengthened way those really tight areas. And then guess what? Oh, now we don't feel like we have to just dig in and do a deep stretch. I'm not a fan of, quote, stretching.
I agree with you. And one of the things that I wrote down when you were talking before was the neurological aspect of Pilates and how exactly like that, where you get the stability from being on the reformer or having your feet in the straps and being like, okay, I'm going to move through a range of motion that my brain is now, wait a minute, Golgi tendon organs aren't like, I can't move in this range. It's like, no, I'm supported. Then your brain is, oh, wait a minute, now I can move in this new range of motion. You tie in the breathing aspect of everything you're talking about. And now it's not necessarily magically that your muscles are now longer. They are now strengthened in those weird positions because your brain was like, hey, no, I can move here now because I've experienced, I am safe, I can move.
Yeah, Pilates is so much brain training. And because so much of what we teach in the Pilates world, and I would say I do it more so than some other modalities of reformer Pilates, is really tapping into that staying connected in a elongated position and retraining our brain. And I think a lot of it is we're so used to go big or go home, go super hard, have bigger ranges of motion in the gym, to some degrees that then when we come into Pilates, and I would say sometimes almost more males than even athletic females have to really watch the range of motion. And I don't know if in the very beginning, Justin, you remember, it's like I'm always there spotting, especially the guys, that very first time, because you want to like muscle your body through it. And we have to retrain our body that, oh, we're not here to just push the weight. We're here to move the weight from within our body. And it's a whole mind reset and rewiring. And when you learn how to do that, and this is the piece that I always love with athletes, is when you learn how to become stronger within and the brain training that is along with this, and then you take it into weights, you get stronger faster, which is cool.
I couldn't agree with you more. And again, I'm living proof of it because I've always had what people would consider tight hips or whatnot. And ever since I've been going, like adding it into my repertoire, like now I understand why you go and you read and you hear about athletes doing it. Like, yes, you talk about helping a lot of pregnant moms, and that's a lot of what you have here. But you've told me, and we've talked before, that working with athletes and being able to help them as well. So it's not just something like, oh yeah, females and moms do it. It's no, like you've literally trained athletes doing this.
Yes. Yeah. And yes, over the years, I have worked with a lot of that pre-postnatal population because I love it, because it is a underserved population. I would also say for any strength and conditioning coaches out there that work with females, and this is the thing I say, because I have prenatal instructor training courses out there. And I think so many times instructors, coaches think, I don't work with that pre or postnatal population. But here's my piece to that is there's no such thing as having too much information. And at some point, most females will get pregnant. And because of so much of the training that we do in the weight training world, I see so much dysfunction for females in particular that come out of strength training world because they are bracing, they are gripping, they are holding their breath when they're doing squats, they are putting pressure downward on their pelvic floor, and it can lead to all sorts of issues later on. And I don't want to go too deep, so Justin, please pull me back if you need me to. But with females in particular, we could argue that everything I say about females applies to males, but the biggest difference is obviously the anatomy, right? Women tend to have more pelvic floor issues because of the way our anatomy is. Men don't tend to have as much symptoms, but they can. But you could look at a male, for example, it could be their pelvic floor could be so restricted, their pelvic floor and their hips, and it's leading to back pain or hip pain, right? That might be, I'll argue with guys and say, they're like, pelvic floor, why does this even enter my world? And I'm like, well, do you have back pain? They're like, yeah. I'm like, you should listen to what I have to say, because if we're so tight and restricted, I would argue guys are the same way, but because I have tended to work with just a lot of women over the years, and I see that restriction in their pelvic floor, in their pelvis, we're really grippy. When we've just done a lot of weight training, we tend to be really grippy in the hip flexors, in the obliques, that can tend to pull on the low back. But what happens is the pelvic floor, and not just the pelvic floor, but all that tissue of the base of the pelvis, that pelvic floor, inside the hip capsules, right, can get really restricted. And we know now for optimal pelvic floor function, Dr. Diane Lee, I think it was 2011, I want to say, because that was the year my one daughter was born, and I remember like finding all of her research way back when. And this stuff is not even taught at university. I didn't learn anything about pelvic floor. I didn't learn anything about fascia when I was going through all my exercise science, which is why I love talking to people about it and educating, because I would bet that most strength and conditioning coaches don't know half of the stuff that I'm talking about with pelvic floor deep core. And so when we understand pelvic floor function, the pelvic floor functions a little bit on its own, but for optimal function, it's the entire deep core. It's from your pelvis. It's what are your hips doing? What's going on with all of that fascial tissue around all of your organs? How are you breathing? What's going on with your diaphragm? What about your intercostals? How's your mid back? How are your feet? It's a whole body function when we talk about pelvic floor or deep core function. And we tend to talk about and just do like core training and things like that. I like to take it deeper for people so that I'm actually helping them to create more space through their body. And with that, we're going to tap into that pelvic floor deep core function more optimally for women, but also for men. Justin, I think about it in class, we don't just anytime we do a flexion movement, we don't just round our spine and jam, right? We're always working on lengthening. We have to find that space first. And then it's working on what are your ribs doing? How is your breath helping to activate from the pelvis up? And then we're flexing, because yes, Flexion is a functional movement. We got to learn how to get up and down from the ground. And yes, are you going to round your spine if you're getting up off the couch or out of bed? Sure. But we can do so much to really train our spine to be stronger and create more space when we're always working on that lengthening and thinking about or educating our clients about what is our pelvis doing? What is our pelvic floor doing for both females and males? And so many times there's just so much restriction because they're so locked up and tight that neither know how to really release through that pelvis. And if we want to get stronger, deeper in our body, and from a fascial perspective, we have to learn to engage the tissue. Notice I don't just say muscles because it's not just muscles.
What's up, everybody? Taking a quick break from the show to talk about one of our sponsors, TeamBuildr. I've been using TeamBuildr since 2019 when I was at Towson. I still use it with my remote athletes. I also use it at Goldfinch, which is the private sector gym I train at, and we use it at Centennial, which is the high school that I'm working at. Now, if you're printing on lift cards because you say, oh, I can't afford TeamBuildr, guess what? TeamBuildr has a pre-written grant that you can locate on their website. You simply change the name of you, your organization, and the areas that they highlighted, and they can help you get TeamBuildr at your facility, your university, whatever it is, so that way you can optimize how you train your athletes with this software. Now, TeamBuildr is also a part owner in the Plyomat. The Plyomat is something that I utilize at Goldfinch, and it helps you be able to see how high somebody jumped, the ground contact time, and RSI. You can get all that conveniently right there. You can reach out to your rep from TeamBuildr to be able to get more information on the Plyomat. It's fast, it's reliable, it's convenient, and it's trusted by coaches worldwide. Check them out as well as TeamBuildr in the link down below.
We're working here. We're working all that fascial tissue. We have to learn how to engage that tissue in a more gentle way, because for optimal fascial engagement, it has to be lighter. If we are just grippy and grabby in all of our tissue, it's like our body's hanging on for dear life, trying to stabilize. And it's a really cool concept when people start to understand, no, I actually need to breathe gentler, breathe deeper, breathe slower, and activate less. It's this whole idea I talk a lot about of like less is truly more. And it's a very hard concept to initially get on top of and really start to understand and feel in your body when we're used to just having to have weight to feel that stimulus of our body.
Like you said, guys have the same. I needed it. That's why I was actually able to be like, hey, I want help with my hips and my core. I know that you're the expert to it. But a lot of the time, guys will be like, I'm stronger than you, little girl. I don't need to listen to you. And it's get rid of that. No, you're not. Like, listen to the instructor who is the instructor doing the thing. Outside of that, we do have some younger listeners, like coaches that are either interns or just starting their GAs, and they maybe aren't being taught pelvic floor in their undergrad or in their graduate degrees. Talk about some of the major muscles and some of that area just to allow them to then go. I wrote the Diane Lee research, but things for them to then further investigate upon their own as well.
Yeah. So when I teach all of my instructors, like, what is your deep core, right? So it includes all of the pelvic floor muscles. And so a visual I like to give clients, and this is something I would encourage everyone to work with their clients, is literally just sitting. So right now I'm sitting on a flat stool, and I have clients like rock from their pubic bone to their tailbone, and then sits bones to sits bones, because so much of what, when we're reteaching our client and they're thinking core, they think just their abs on the front of their belly, right? So when you start to tell them that underneath their pelvis matters, they don't really understand it until you're like, okay, find those bony points to help get their brain thinking that is the base of my core. And a lot of people are like, I've never ever even thought about that in the slightest before. I give this visual, it's a diamond shape, essentially, like pubic bone to sits bones to tailbone. That is the base. So all that tissue that we sit on makes up the pelvic floor. Then from there, we go upward. We've got our main abdominal muscles, but the other really fascinating thing, we've got, rectus abdominals, obliques. You've got your transverse abdominals, which I feel like gets talked a lot about in the Pilates world. What gets missed is the fascia in the abdominal wall. So when we're always doing that, like I talk about zipping up and lengthening, we're not as much working the muscles. You're going to tap into the muscles of your abs, of course, but you're getting deeper. We have these fascial layers in our abdominal wall. And so when we initiate with our exhale, that pelvic floor lightly drawing and pulling upward, we're going to stimulate the pelvic floor lightly. We're also going to stimulate all that fascia of the abdominal wall. as well as inside the body. So because we have fascia that wraps around all of our organs, I like to teach my instructors that our organs are being suspended in our body by that fascial tissue. So then it's like a good visual of, oh, I've got my so because what happens, Justin, is that if people just focus on like the pelvic floor as the base, they tend to then overactivate. And it's, oh, I got to use my pelvic floor to hold up my organs, especially in the female world of like pelvic floor stuff. So if we are always thinking, oh, the pelvic floor is the lead in doing everything, then we have problems. We just want to look at the pelvic floor as a piece of that core. So we think of inside of our torso is like our organs are being suspended by fascial tissue, right? Because fascia wraps around every single organ. You literally could have a shoulder or neck issue because you've got restriction of an organ tied up underneath your rib cage or up against the inside of your pelvis, like all sorts of stuff like that. Now, the other thing is we've got all those deep layers of muscles like your multifidus and deeper muscles along your spine. So we also want to think about those deep muscles on the like that are really deep around the spine, as well as tissue that's on the inside of the spine going up. Then we get to the diaphragm. I think the diaphragm is very underserved because we think about breathing and we think about diaphragmatic breathing is taught, I feel like has been taught as belly breathing. You guys, true diaphragmatic breathing is not belly breathing. If you think about it for a second, if you just belly breathe, what part of your diaphragm are you breathing into? You're not tapping into the very back of your diaphragm. The back bottom of your diaphragm connects into the kind of middle lower part of your rib cage. Like, think about that. So if we're not back breathing and we're not breathing out to our ribs, we're not truly doing diaphragmatic breathing. So when people are constantly, every inhale, they breathe into their belly, and then every exhale, they're trying to engage their abs, what happens is we end up with a lot of pressure and gripping in the obliques and pressure downward on the pelvis, which is not creating space and it's not getting into the fascial system or that deep core. So I'm trying to like work up the system here. So when we get to that diaphragm, to stimulate the diaphragm, which is going to help with that pelvic floor, like light lifting up through the body, is we have to breathe out to the sides of our ribs and into the back of your rib cage. It's amazing the amount of people I've come across over the years. They like do Wim Hof breathing. They've done all this crazy breathing. And they're like, wait, I've never breathed into my back before. I'm like, how can we do crazy deep breathing and not breathe into our back? We're missing this entire like capability for our body to learn how to breathe so much better. So I love to teach people to breathe into their back and out to the sides of their ribs, because that's going to allow you on your inhale to stay lightly active through your core. So that way we're not letting go every single time. Does that make sense, Justin, when I'm saying that? You get that. Yeah. You've heard me in class try to say all that. All those intercostal,
a year's worth of experience and time with you, so that's part of it too.
And then like your intercostal muscles are part of your deep core. And then I like to add on that the mid back is to me, when I'm teaching deep core, it's the mid back is a little bit of it, because what I've discovered over the 20 years of doing all this is that if the mid back is not lightly active, notice I'm not saying we're not gripping, we're not like intensely working the mid back, but if we don't have a little light activation of the mid back, I feel like it's harder for people to get that like pelvic floor, deep core organ lift in their body. Because if you notice, Justin, if you think to class, like so much of what we do, even if we're not doing an arm exercise, I'm cueing a little bit of that mid back, or like we're opening up across our sternum and our collarbones, because so many of us are so tight and rounded because of computer work, on our phones, sitting too much, things like that. So always working on opening up to improve that posture. And when we can learn to be stronger from within that deep core, you become stronger. Number one, you breathe so much better. You take the stress off of your pelvis, off of your hips, off of your low back, and off of your neck.
What's up, everybody? Taking a quick break from the show to talk about one of our sponsors, Hawkin Dynamics. I've been using Hawkin Dynamics ever since I was at Towson. Still utilize it today when I'm at the private sector at Goldfinch. Even brought the plates from Goldfinch over to Centennial to do some force plate testing with the football team there. We've done force plate testing with other high school athletes. It is something that you need to get. If you want more help with it about how to practically use it and you want to reach out to us, feel free to reach out to us at service@strengthcoachnetwork.com. Not only do I utilize it with lower body assessments, I use it with upper body assessments, plyo push-ups, prone Y assessments. You can also utilize it for what I call an upper body isometric mid thigh pull, where essentially you're doing a push up at the strongest range and you're pushing into an immovable force, so a barbell, same way you do an isometric mid thigh pull. Like I said, been using them for years, valid, reliable. The customer service is fantastic. Go check out Hawkin Dynamic in the link down below, and you will not be disappointed.
And you could argue your shoulders for that matter, right? It just really sets you up for such better success moving. And then the thing is, we don't want to be strong in a locked down position. We want to be, I like to call it like fascially fluid with our body so that we can move with ease, right? So that's that whole kind of, I know you don't like the word injury prevention because I know there's no such thing as, quote, you can't prevent all injuries or anything like that, but you can better prepare your body that it can move with ease. Right? So if you're more fascially fluid and protected in your body because your fascial system is stronger but not locked down, then in theory, we'll call it theory, you could be.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying with that. Because it is. I always just look at it from the lens of, okay, if I'm training, I've trained Morgan before. And if I was like, hey, Erica, I'm going to prevent injuries for Morgan. You don't have to worry about it anymore. They're prevented when she trains with me. And then if she goes and gets hurt, it's, hey, you said you're going to prevent injuries. And so that's where I always just never wanted to say to athletes or to parents or coaches, hey, I can reduce the risk of it, but there is still that inherent risk of, especially when you get these athletes nowadays that are bigger, faster, stronger, which is why I do think that Pilates is such a good complement. Because earlier today I went and you talked about being tight from sitting down all the time. It's like, you know what really loosens me up is when I go do jujitsu and somebody's trying to rip my arm sideways like this. So that does help too. But going and doing this, doing all these, even hearing you cue through the deep core stuff, I started to do it while sitting here. And I'm like, I actually feel better sitting here. I don't feel as crammed. I hope our listeners did the same. And if they don't, rewind about 5 minutes and listen to what she said, because it all makes sense. And when you actually apply it, you talked about return to play and the post-pregnancy stuff. I think that this can help out a lot of strength coaches in terms to the return to play stuff, whether it's pubalgia, groin, hamstring, hernia, because if you have a bad core and you have an injury to whether it's the groin, hamstring, or hernia, I think this can unlock and really help the coaches out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. And it comes back to that. What is the pelvis doing? And I think the reason why I love working with people with the pelvis, starting them with the pelvis, because think about the pelvis. The pelvis is held together by tissue, all the bony pieces of the pelvis. So I always feel like we have so much potential with what we can do with someone's function of their pelvis, helping it to realign, helping your hips to work together. If you've got an injury, by working these deeper layers of the core to help create more stability and more strength. So much of it is, again, it all comes back to tissue. Now, again, for some people, there could be a hip dysplasia or things like that. But for most people, a lot of injuries are related to a stress on the tissue and or just too much force, right? And then the weakest link is going to tear or pull or something like that.
I think about lower cross syndrome too, like where it's okay, I have that anterior pelvic tilt, and you obviously with pelvic floor are completely aware of the pelvic position when you're in class. And it's okay, now we're not getting into that world where glutes are off, hip flexors are on, low back is on, cueing and fixing that. So any of our listeners out there that's, oh my gosh, I always have athletes in anterior pelvic tilt and I'm trying to fix these things, like that to me, I've noticed in class and from working with you on it is just something that has, I think, had a profound effect on my back and my hip health.
Oh, so glad to hear that, Justin. One thing I will say, I just like to add with the anterior tilt is we have to watch that we're not cueing clients out of an anterior tilt by tucking their butt and squeezing their glutes
and smashing your low back.
I've actually seen Facebook ads with, there's someone out there promoting that, and every time I see it, it makes me cringe because I'm like, no, because the problem with it, now, does it mean they maybe need to strengthen part of their glute muscles, hamstrings? Sure, absolutely. But if we're taking that extreme anterior tilt because someone's pulling in their back a lot, and we're just like, oh, just tuck your pelvis to get you out of it, temporarily, it might feel better. But what does it do if we are forcing the pelvis to tuck? Let me tell you, if your pelvic floor deep hips weren't tight before, they're going to be even tighter after, because I have spent my entire career untucking people's pelvises for people that tuck their pelvis. So it's this fine balance, right? And everyone's structural alignment is a little bit different. Some people are going to have a little bit more of an anterior tilt. Women in general, I will tell you, your female population generally going to do better and tend to have more of an anterior tilt than your male population is going to be a little bit more of a neutral and not quite as anterior. But what I've seen so much taught over the years of specifically for females, and we can talk about what I see in males too, I tend to see it as males get older, is that tucked pelvis. And I think it's a way of, for males, of them like protecting their back as they get older, because they like temporarily, like they start having back pain, right? They don't know how to strengthen their deep or activate their deep core correctly. So it's like they start to naturally tuck their pelvis because it makes their back feel a little bit better temporarily. But what it does in time is it's actually going to put more pressure on the lumbar spine and really restrict through the pelvis. Same thing with females, because and this is even taught you guys in the Pilates world. So I do not teach traditional Pilates. Traditional Pilates is taught with a tucked pelvis. We do not teach that. There's the occasional exercise we'll teach rolling through that posterior pelvis. But the reason why we don't teach in a tucked pelvic position in doing footwork, anything outside of like rollbacks and roll-ups, we're like rolling through the spine to train that tissue to move better, is if we are in a tucked pelvic position, we're putting a lot of pressure downward, generally on the pelvic floor and at your lumbar spine and your sacrum. And let me tell you, people really cannot stabilize in that position. And this is why, to me, when we want to bridge that gap of, okay, what can we do in Pilates and this type of training to like, how does it translate to weight training, strength and conditioning, all of that, the heavier weights, agility, power, all that kind of stuff, is if we are doing things with a tucked pelvic position, and then when we don't have that proper deep core activation, then we can't keep that length and that support through our torso, that if we otherwise had more of a neutral to a slight anterior position, I would say males more neutral, females more anterior, because of the shape of the pelvis. Women tend to feel that deep core connection better with a little bit of an anterior tilt. Men are going to be more neutral because your pelvis is just more narrow, right? So there is a difference. And traditional Pilates, Joseph Pilates, he taught a lot of tucked. There's stuff and that where in over the years, and this is why I really strive to like weave in all the research and all the things that I've discovered along the way to make the modality of reformer Pilates, mat Pilates, all that stuff that we teach much more conducive to proper core.
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Powerlift. I used Powerlift when I was at Harvard, Maryland, and the University of Iowa. I was also part of the staff that had the new weight room at the University of Iowa, the 32-rack, beautiful facility. I was a part of that. I also have Powerlift's equipment nowadays. Powerlift Strong, made here in the great state of Iowa in the great country of the United States. They're able to work with you on any customizations that you need, logos, height, whatever it is, the limitations that you have. Their equipment is strong. The people there, they're very good people. Check them out in the link down below. And if you have any questions on how to work with them, reach out to us at service@strengthcoachnetwork.com, and we would be delighted to help.
Function so that we are moving better. So we got to stay away from that tucked pelvic position in squats and lunges and all of that. That is my professional opinion. I teach all that, and it amazes me time and time again how many people, as we get them out of that tucked pelvic position, they feel so much better. Now, we can't do it for some people depending on how tight they are. It can't happen overnight, because if I have clients that go from a tucked positioning of their pelvis and then all of a sudden they try to get a little anterior tilt, like they're just pulling in their back. We actually have to start to open up and get that tissue inside the pelvis and the hips to work more efficiently and effectively to stabilize their pelvis. Does that make sense?
It does. And one of the things that I wrote down there was like, man, I think this makes sense as to why I liked your class so much and why I like being a part of your studio, because it doesn't seem cookie cutter Pilates-ish, and that's my own ignorance. So I don't know. So when you said it's not traditional Pilates, like I was drawn to that because I'm not a traditional strength and conditioning coach. Like you don't have to clean to be good at your sport. You don't have to squat. It's always about what's the principle that we're trying to train, and then the methodology we can work around. And I've seen you do that with other clients in class. To our listeners out there, then, what is traditional Pilates, because maybe that's why they've been turned off by it, and they're telling their athletes, hey, don't do that, that's a bunch of voodoo whatever. I'm not saying I believe that,
Yeah.
but if that's what other coaches are saying.
Yeah. So I think C would be a good one. I wish I need to get a quote from him to explain from his perspective that I worked with a lot. And he always says it to me is I've worked with 20 some other Pilates instructors. I don't know what you do, but it's different in a better way that I get so much more out of what you do. Really what we've talked about is what sets me apart, right? Is this deep core function, the fascia. So to a degree, did I learn some of that in my Pilates training? Absolutely, but not to the degree that I teach it. That's why I'm creating my own curriculum to work to certify Pilates instructors, because and again, traditional Pilates, I'm not knocking it or saying it's bad. Some people, it might be the greatest thing in the world for them, and maybe it works really well. There's also the other end of the spectrum where some people have taken Pilates and put it on steroids. So it's like weight training Pilates. And I don't like that either. I've tried to find this middle ground where Pilates for me is how can I help someone to move better? How, when someone comes and either does a class in the studio or does my online stuff, which is more mat strength training and flow stuff. We do a lot of ball, fascial work, things like that. How can I help someone to move better in outside of the studio, right? How can I help them when they go to the gym to be moving better? That is my biggest purpose. And one really big thing that I teach my instructors is you have to know why you're teaching what you're teaching, or you shouldn't be teaching it. That's how I really ingrain my instructors to know, okay, are we just teaching this Pilates exercise because it's fun? Now, in a class setting, that might be a little gray area because you've got more people in a class, but you still need to be answering why we're teaching what we're teaching. And we don't just teach an exercise, because it's fun and it looks good. And I think that's where Pilates can sometimes traditional Pilates, some of these exercises, they look so intimidating and so hard. And truly, as you get into intermediate and advanced, it is truly really hard. Like even the intermediate stuff that we do, there's a big difference. You've got to really be able to stabilize. And I think so many people try to bump up themselves in Pilates and do like these flashier moves. Like I always say on Instagram, like we could show really fun things, but it's not the stuff that's really moving someone forward in their life.
Doing tabletop legs when you're doing just circles, doing circle arms one direction, the other direction, and then doing in a while. Like if you actually do it right, that's hard enough, people. Okay, so
absolutely, yes.
Any of my coaches out there that have done it, you know what I'm talking about. Like it doesn't have to be the craziest thing in the world. Like keeping tabletop legs and then even tabletop and extending them. Yeah, get good at the basics, folks, because the same thing can be said about strength and conditioning.
Yeah, absolutely. 1,000%. And that's why I try to drill that home with clients. I didn't fully answer the question. So pulling back into like traditional Pilates. So like Joseph Pilates taught a lot of Pilates in more of a flex spine. And again, more, I would say when you get into like intermediate mat stuff and things like that's like a lot of what he taught to me is almost more intermediate. You've got to really be able to stabilize, learn how to lengthen, and then like really roll through your spine and lift your legs and do all that kind of stuff. Because to be able to do that is really hard to stabilize. If I go back to some of the traditional Pilates moves, some of the ones that I have the biggest issues with is some of those are just really too hard for people. And if people go into doing a lot of like rounded and flex spine movements and rolling on their spine and doing all this kind of stuff, it's not going to feel good for them. We're not really helping them to create that good, strong foundation so that we can eventually get them maybe to do some of those if it sounds purposeful. Well, back to what I was saying about we're spending too much time flex forward today. So like from the 1950s to today, our lifestyle has massively changed. We need to be doing a lot more extension and lengthening. And so I really work to create that balance every time we do a class. I teach a lot of that in my online stuff, all that, because I think it's so important. The other thing is I don't teach anything with the pelvis seated and extreme rotation. Okay. So that's some traditional stuff, because we now know if your pelvis is stuck, right, essentially, and we're trying to rotate, and then we can tend to torque on that lumbar spine too much. And I learned that years and years ago, early on in my career. And I was like, oh, someone in more of the functional movement stuff taught me something. And I was like, oh, that made it like clicked for me. So from that moment on, I will only teach stuff kneeling if we're doing rotation, especially if you're stacked. Like on your back, we'll do that like rotation laying down. But if we've got weight pushing down on the pelvis, we will never just sit on our pelvis and then rotate. You're always going to be up on your knees. So we allow that spiral. Why is that? Because we get into our fascial system and out those fascial lines. If we stop at the pelvis, we're not getting our fascial lines to engage as much. We want to really be able to lift, and we always have to have our hips to be able to move with us a little bit. So that's why those are like two kind of, I would say almost like little pet peeves of mine. And there might be instructors out there that will disagree with me, and that's fine. But I teach the way that I do because I've been doing this for 20 plus years. And I've worked with so many people with dysfunctional movement patterns, pelvic floor issues, back pain, neck pain, knee pain, all of that. So I really strive to help people get out of pain and prevent pain as much as possible.
What's up, y'all? Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about another one of our sponsors, Vitruve. I've been utilizing Vitruve for a while now, and I absolutely love the convenience of this app. The encoder is at a price that you cannot beat compared to the competitors. Also, I don't personally like the camera apps. I've known that they continue to break down, and I really enjoy having this encoder attached directly to the bar. Vitruve does that. Not only does it do that, but it'll show me velocity loss during the set, shows me average velocity, all of it right within the app. Not only that, for the app on the individual athlete, there's a Vitruve Teams app where now, as the coach, I can see all the results from my athletes. I can API that into my TeamBuildr, and now everything that I'm trying to do, get better competition, better intent in the weight room, I am able to do with Vitruve. If you want more information about them, click the link down below, or you can ask us questions directly at service@strengthcoachnetwork.com, and we would love to answer those questions for you.
And I work with a lot of, we could call them adult athletes too, that just want to be able to keep lifting weights and doing all their things that they can as long as they can. And so I'm like, this can really set you up for such great success. So when you go to the gym, everything you're doing there is getting even better. And it amazes me time and time again how people are like, oh my gosh, I am feeling so much stronger in the gym or at whatever other kind of strength classes they're doing since I've added this Pilates. And their brain has a hard time figuring that out because they're like, wait, I come to Pilates, you have me moving slower, we're really focused on our breathing. I feel like every time everyone's like, I feel so good when I leave, but it feels so different than weight training. And the brain has such a hard time figuring this out for a lot of people. And I think that can be the discouraging piece. I think if you're going to truly try reformer Pilates, or any Pilates for that matter, like you have to be in it for a time period. You can't just go do a class once and be like, oh, I tried it, I felt it, because really you're not going to feel what you should be feeling in one session. I'm going to argue it's going to take a while. And even when you do start to feel those deeper connections in your body, it's still going to take it's just like this evolution, this journey with your body. And that's a big thing I like to always tell clients is it's just, you have to start with where you're at, number one, but then we can only get better and better. And it's like learning a whole new foreign language of movement that we've not been taught.
I would agree with that. And building off of that, you teed it up perfectly for me. A, how hard is it to teach regular people how to do Pilates, but then B, other people to teach other people? Because we'll talk about it later, but our strength coaches out there, if you are interested in this and you want to learn about it, you can get her course, and it comes with CEUs to the NSCA to help you with your CSCS. But like, to me, okay, I just got an athlete to squat, sprint. Like, it's so much easier than some of the things you're trying to get people to do. So A, how hard is it to teach just your clients, but then coaches to then teach the clients and the clientele?
So when you're working with athletes, I will tell you they're one of my favorite populations to work with because they're in it to win it, right? They're like, oh, I'm up for the challenge. So when I've worked with athletes, I really haven't had an issue with them. Now, it depends on the age. If we're talking teenagers have a harder time learning things because it's a body awareness thing. I feel like that, like, you can get them to a degree, and we have to assess each individual of what is their load capacity that they can handle to not be overwhelmed. So this stuff can absolutely be taught. You're not going to teach it in one session. It's something that I think it's really important to learn and start to do it on your own body if you're going to teach this. So you get to experience it and feel it and figure out what are maybe some of the mindset or the mental cues and things. I do a lot of teaching of visualization. because we do know the power of visualization. I'm sure, Justin, you guys talk about that. But I have found too over the years, if I can get a client first starting to learn some of these techniques and changing their breathing, changing their movement patterns a little bit, I encourage them to visualize the cues I give them, and then it happens faster. So even if they're not feeling it, because this is the problem in the beginning, this will be the piece that any of you that are like, I want to learn this. The biggest struggle I see with clients is, especially the athletic ones, are like, I want to feel it right then and there, because they're used to feeling their body. They're used to being able to do really about anything, right? Because they're an overachiever. They're a high performing human being. And so that initial thing is going to be like, wait, this is a total 180 to what I've been doing. Their brain fights it. It's their brain more than their body. Their brain fights it. So if you can get them to practice the visual cues, they will be more successful faster. And you have to just tell them basically, look, you're learning a new language for your body. You're not going to get this overnight, but we're going to work to weave it in. So it absolutely is absolutely possible. And when I teach, like I have my online, it's our foundational training. It's not specific to like my reformer Pilates comes after. I basically have our foundational trainings first, which is, there is elements, like all the foundational stuff I teach. You can do that. You don't have to have a reformer. It's more mat-based stuff. We work in squats and all of that with it. So you don't have to teach squats the way that I do, but maybe you want to. It could be a good warm-up that you work with some of your athletes so they get that core firing a little bit more. Just stuff to play around with. But a lot of it, there's a lot of mat exercises. We teach stuff with bands, with a fascial ball, things like that, because there's a lot of techniques that we need to work on with our clients to get them out of those grippy, tight patterns. And breath is one of them, and teaching them that less truly can be more. And so I look at this as a compliment. It's not about changing, say, their training to make them a better athlete. It's something you're layering in to have the best of both worlds, in a sense. So yes, anybody can learn this. Athletes definitely can learn it, but I'm not going to tell you how long it's going to take to teach a client, because that's a very independent thing. Some people pick this stuff up pretty fast. Other people, they think they start to get it, and then 6 months later, they'll say to you, oh my God, I think I finally felt in my core what you've been trying to teach me for the last 6 months. I love those little epiphanies for people. They think they start to get it, and then there'll be a day where they're like, oh, nope, something finally woke up. And we're also working within the nervous system here too, and your lymphatic system. Like I love this work because there's so many layers that we're working within the body, not just one system.
Mat Pilates sounds a lot like yoga. Is that what somebody like? I know it's not going to be the exact same, but to the lay person, that's wait a minute. That kind of would this be good for me to use with my athletes? And the reason I say this is a lot of times your basketball strength conditioning population, sometimes football day after a game, or on their Thursdays if they have a Saturday game, so game day -2. They'll do either yoga, stretching, bulletproofing, functional movement screen, corrective exercises. So it's, wait a minute, that could be a way for coaches to be incorporating this in a group setting where it's, wait a minute, I can learn from Erica on how to do this stuff and help with pelvic floor stuff so I can help work with my athletic trainers. That's what the angle that I was going with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be perfect. And I would even argue that if you've got clients that love to do yoga, if they can learn these fundamentals that I teach, it will enhance their yoga practice, because I see so much yoga. It's taught just like going deep and stretching in the joints. And I don't love that, because I actually see injuries come out of that. We have to learn to find that opposition and be connected through our tissue, even when we're doing things like yoga. So that's my thoughts on that. If you're going to do yoga, do it with the same mindset as to what I'm teaching in essentially like the Pilates world.
Shout out to the Pilates world too, though, because I got one of my first ever ab cramps when we were doing that little silver bar, like the sit-up thing. I don't know what it was, but like where you hold it, I was like, holy cow, what is this? This is nice. At least I got some to get a cramp. Like, I'll take that.
Yeah. Some of them can get really intense as we start to slowly ramp up and get more intermediate exercises. You learn where you have to really learn to lengthen and then move from your core. So I don't want you to cramp in your abs, but I want you to feel that deeper layer working for sure. So I've had that before though.
I'm still that meathead. We're like, yeah, that's awesome.
That's okay.
I think just feet in straps, leg circles is worth the price of admission. So to anybody that's, oh, should I try this out?
Yes.
I'm telling you, if you can do feet in the straps and be able to do that for a period of time, that right there is worth the price of admission into a reformer class, because that has been like a godsend, I think.
Yeah, people love feet in the straps. I think if I didn't teach, we teach it after every class, unless we're set up for tower work, and then we do the purple spring ones. But yeah, I think I would have a rebellion if we didn't teach feet in the straps at the end of every class. People love it. It does feel good. It's good to move those hips in that way, because there's nothing else that replicates that.
Not even a little bit. We want to be respectful of your time. So is there anything else you want to talk about how, again, Pilates can be incorporated for strength and conditioning coaches, athletic trainers, physical therapists, have all three that listen. We've got strength coaches that are in private, high school, college, pro, and the tactical setting. So police, fire, military. How can this incorporate and be into their world?
I feel like when you learn these fundamentals that I teach, it really enhances everything that you're doing. It can teach you how to, what I always say, as you learn this as a coach, learn how to do it on your own body first, so you really get to experience it. And then I teach so many cueing, so many different cues, and there might be certain ones that resonate with you. There might be certain ones that resonate with your clients, things like that. And you just have to start experiencing it on your body, because it's a whole, I just hear all the time from people, it's just a very unforeign way to move your body, because a lot of it's a 180 to what we've been taught, right? And I'm never saying don't do any of the strength and conditioning stuff. I'm like, no, how can we actually put this in to enhance what you're doing? And that's how you have to think about it. It's more tools in your toolbox to help you and your clients to better themselves. And I think especially it's really good if we've got anyone dealing with pain in the body, like how can we unload that pressure? Because so much pain in the body is just compression. And we've not really been taught, at least I was never taught in personal training and any of that kind of stuff, like how do we unload the spine? How do we really create space in our body? And that's a really big piece that can be learned through all of this.
Amen to that. I will be seeing you or whoever is teaching on Thursday and Saturday and the next week. I got to get caught up because family was in town. We had the holidays and then just traveled to NSCA conference last week. And like I said, anybody, y'all got your CSCS or your CPT listening here and you want some CEUs, obviously Strength Coach Network can help you out, but so can Erica's stuff with her Pilates class. We'll link everything down below. Erica, thanks for coming on. Greatly appreciate you spending the last hour with us.
Thanks so much, Justin. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching that video. If you enjoyed it, click right here for videos just like that, and make sure you click here to subscribe to our channel. Have a great rest of your day.